Welcome everyone to today's talk. The topic that I'm going to cover today is one that relates to the role or the potential impediment of ego in our asana practice. So let's paint a scenario, perhaps in a group setting, where the class is being asked by the teacher to perform a balancing posture, standing on one leg or the other. And what I notice in those situations as a teacher is that some people will just immediately get about trying to balance and come into the posture. And others will actually be looking around the room, looking at what other students are doing in the class and perhaps practicing a little bit as well. Now, some of them you could say are looking at other students in order to find a visual reference point in order to help their own practice. But in a lot of cases, and even in those cases, what we tend to do is we tend to judge or compare ourselves against the models that we are seeing in the room around us. Now, one of the challenges of doing this in terms of our practice is not only does it distract us from what we're supposed to be doing, but it means that somewhere in our minds we have retained a form or a model that we think is the perfect asana that we are practicing. Now, this is inevitable to a certain degree, given that we live in the world of social media, Instagram, and also vast quantities of books now with pictures of different asanas. So it's very, very easy to mistake the fact that because we see someone perfectly executing an asana in an Instagram posture, in an Instagram pose even, or actually, you know what, slip of the tongue, but Instagram posture might not be such a bad terminology. Or you see that same posture in a book, and you think in your mind that unless I'm actually doing that exact version of that exact posture, the classic form, then somehow I'm not doing the asana. So as a result of that, when we see someone else who seems closer to that model than we are, not only do we think that they are perhaps better, but we also kind of judge our own abilities, and maybe we feel down on ourselves, or maybe we feel that we don't have the capacity. And the message that I'd like to bring today is that that really couldn't be further from the truth. There is no such thing as a perfect form, because in yoga, what we're looking for is to find the form that is relevant or that we can relate to in terms of our own bodies, our own anatomies, our own physiology. Now, someone practicing who's 60 years old can't expect to execute the same form as someone who's practicing at the age of 15, who's been practicing since they were 4. Someone with lower back issues, for example, like myself, can't practice certain postures that people that don't have those issues can. And so does that mean that somehow the people that can't are practicing yoga in a lesser way? Another example is this, which is that if, for example, a ballet dancer or someone very flexible comes and practices, externally it may look like they are nailing all the postures and doing them very, very perfectly. But the reality is, as hopefully we're beginning to understand on this channel, that an asana is not merely the physical form that we're practicing. An asana is the physical form to an extent, plus the long, slow, steady breath, plus the awareness of how we're practicing. So someone could be executing a form perfect asana, but their mind could be completely elsewhere, or their breath could be very, very fast, or there could be no focus on the breath at all, which means technically they're not actually practicing asana at all. So what we need to be really careful of is the way that our judging minds and our egotistical minds, which see everything in relation to ourselves, our small selves, somehow ends up compromising our practice, not only in terms of how we feel about ourselves when we practice, but also potentially leading us deeper into an asana than we're ready for, pushing too hard, seeking intensity in the asana to the extent that we end up injured, or that simply we just end up losing focus on what we're doing because we're more concerned with watching what other people are doing than what we're practicing ourselves. So the idea of letting go of ego is the idea simply of letting go of the forms and models that we think we should be adhering to in our practice that tend to gravitate in asana towards the physical side, and to bring our attention inwards so that we can become truly aware of the asana that works for us. And so often, for example, when people find it hard to do a forward bend, I'll cue that they a seated forward bend. I'll cue that they bend the knee so that they get more of a feeling of folding over. But of course, again, most of the imagery of seated forward bends are with the legs very, very straight, and the mind interprets that this posture is solely about stretching the hamstrings, which again couldn't be further from the truth, because actually one of the functions of Paschimottanasana, this seated forward bend, is actually to stimulate apana, the lower prana in the body, which is done through bringing a contraction to the belly and maybe bringing the stomach closer to the thighs, which we can enable by having the knees bent. So I'm just using this as an example of showing that what may appear to be one thing to the external form, once we have a little bit more knowledge and understanding of the holistic nature of asana, may not actually be the case. So let us see, like Buddha told us, he said, wear your ego like a loose-fitting jacket. And in this case, we can wear the ego loosely and let go of the models that we have of other people practicing or the way that we should be practicing, and just see what arises by listening within rather than judging with the analytical comparative mind. So as always, please reflect on this. Let me know any comments below. Please do subscribe to the channel if you like this content. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you again soon. Namaste.